Welcome to a Catholic Family News special report. Today we are going to have a program discussing the recent events related to the pro-life priest, Father Frank Pavone, who has for many years been a very powerful voice in the pro-life movement and a force behind the Priests for Life movement to really encourage his fellow priests to get involved in the pro-life movement. He may be known to some viewers. He spent some time on EWTN network, having programming and often saying the rosary there. Well, it was announced over the weekend in a very strange set of events from Catholic News Agency, which is a subsidiary of EWTN, that the Vatican dicastery for the clergy had laicized, and we'll talk about what that means a little more. Laicized, they claimed, Father Pavone. This was a letter that was sent by the Apostolic Nuncio to the bishops of the United States, informing them that this had occurred and claiming that this had been imposed upon Father Pavone as of November 9th. He has subsequently responded to that announcement. But to help us today to make, well, sense, I'm not sure will make sense, but to think about and try to understand this, we've invited to the program Father John Lovell from the Coalition for Canceled Priests. And Father Lovell's joining us for the second time. He spoke with us last year about that organization. So welcome back to Catholic Family News, Father.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for having me again, and blessed Advent to you.
And to you as well. In our final days of Advent this year, we get a full 4 weeks. It's the
Yes.
longest I think Advent can be. But
Yes, indeed.
Thank you for joining us to discuss this topic. I know a lot of Catholics have been asking about it, trying to find out about it. So I'd like to start, before we talk about Father Pavone in particular, to take a step back. And you're really ideally placed to help us understand this concept of a canceled priest. So how do we distinguish between what we mean by a canceled priest and a priest maybe who's really done things wrong and is receiving legitimate consequences of his actions? You obviously have to discern this in your work. What is it that how do you describe the difference between somebody who is canceled and someone who's just receiving their just desserts?
It's a great question. It's a question I'm often asked, phrased a little bit differently. People often will
Yes.
say to me, "What's the difference between a canceled priest that did something wrong and a canceled priest that did nothing wrong?" And I said, "Well, if a priest was removed for doing something wrong, that's not him being canceled. It is him receiving justice, and that's a good thing."
Mm.
We decided when we started this organization to defend priests who've done nothing wrong, but have simply been removed for either being too pro-life, for being too traditional, for standing up and saying, "Hey, you don't have to take the jab if you don't want to." We thought about a lot of titles for the group, and we decided to go with the Coalition for Canceled Priests, simply because in the United States, and I would say throughout the English-speaking world, the term canceled is, while relatively new in this category, it expresses people that are basically just simply saying the truth or saying something common sense, and they're being attacked for it. They're being removed. They're being destroyed because of it. And I think people have to realize this. And, I have to say, you and I both have a very good mutual friend in Christopher Check, and he
Mm.
criticized me a little bit. He says, "Well, you're using a term from the left." And I said, "Chris, to be honest with you, I don't think the left that's a left word at all. I don't think if you would ask anybody on the left, is there such a thing as a cancel culture? They would go, what are you talking about? Of course not. It's certainly something that you see what's happening on the right in our society, in politics, and sadly, it's happening in the church. It's been
Mm.
happening in the church for a long time, probably even longer than in our society. So a canceled priest is a priest that has stand up for some type of orthodoxy and has been removed because of it. Usually, there is no allegation, there's no accusation, and he's not even suspended. I'm not suspended. I'm removed in a non-penal, non-judicial way, or I'm
Mm.
restricted in ministry in a non-penal, non-judicial way. When you figure out what that means, let me know, because you're a lawyer and I'm not. And full disclosure, I am not a canon lawyer. However, being canceled for the last 10 years and fighting for my case all the way up through Rome, I've had to learn a lot of canon law, both from my canonists who represent me and just studying it as well. And
Mm.
one thing that people have to realize too, that, and you know this as a lawyer, that in the Western world, pretty much all Western law comes from the Romans. And that includes church law or canon law. Okay. Now we can go into the differences between Anglo-Saxon and Roman, but still, even the Anglo-Saxon law originates from the Romans. One of the greatest gifts the Romans gave us after um, modern processing of wine would probably be the laws that we have today, and that certainly includes the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. So
Absolutely right. Our law, even Anglo-Saxon, is, you're right, comes from Roman law through the church. That the church has given us to that. With many of these things, we take for granted: presumption of innocence, being told the charges against you, being able to confront witnesses, things like that. But maybe before we again turn, since you may not be a canon lawyer, you've had to learn a lot. You've also met a lot of canceled priests in your work, obviously, to help them. Is there kind of in general trends or signs or sort of things that are very in common among these stories? As you hear the same typical thing? Oh, yep, that as someone, maybe a priest, comes forward or something happens to them, you can say, yeah, this sounds just like the same old story. Are there many of those,
yeah,
any of those you can share?
most are very
Yes.
similar to my case,
Yes.
where again they're not suspended, they're restricted in ministry in this made up term, non-penal, non-judicial way, and it's just a way for the bishops to sidestep canon law.
Hmm.
Excuse me, canon law. And we have to realize that we have canon law for a reason. We have laws in the United States for a reason. It is to protect us. Okay. It's not to
Hmm.
punish people, it is to protect us. And we have those in the church and they need to be followed. And quite sadly, they're not being followed. And if I could say, because I know Catholic Family News is mainly a traditional audience, for those that want to kind of condemn the 1983 Code of Canon Law, I just want to remind all the viewers that the church has only had a universal codex, a universal book of canon law for the last 105 years. There was the 1917 code and there was the 1983 code. And to remind everyone as well, and I think this is even mentioned in the biography by Bishop Tissier of Archbishop Lefebvre, the 83 code actually helped in the defense of the Society of Pius X and many other priests, because it actually gave priests more rights and
Hmm.
basically spelled out those rights in more detail, especially if you're a pastor. One thing that I'm hearing from a lot of people, both on the left and the right, about Father Pavone is, well, as a diocesan priest, if the bishop tells you you have to move, you have to move. Not necessarily so. In fact, the 1983 code looks at pastors more like they did in the 1917 code of being irremovable pastors. So in the 1917 code, you had a distinguishing between irremovable pastors and movable pastors. They got rid of that in the 83, and pretty much everybody became irremovable pastors. If you hold office, you get to keep that office until you resign or do something very serious that warrants your removal. And so this is why we
Yes.
always encourage pastors that if they get canceled, the last thing you do is resign the parish. Do not resign, because you lose a lot of rights as a priest and as a pastor when you resign your parish.
No, you're right. It's really a separate topic we could have a whole show on. But the 1983 code, obviously there are errors in it. There's problems with it, and the way it talks about the ends of marriage, for example. But you're right, on certain level, for that of the accused, it actually expands more rights, particularly subjective intention. It makes a greater criteria, not exactly in the case of Lefebvre, which again many studies have shown under either code, the punishment is not warranted, but it's an even easier case under the
Yes,
1983 code. Very true.
correct.
Well, so let's maybe then, with that background, turn a little bit to Father Pavone, because it's interesting. There are two charges that the letter that has circulated in the media, and again, talking about justice, according to Father Pavone, he's never even been served with this judgment. He's never been given it. It's kind of an odd way. It would be as if somebody was on trial in a civil court, and instead of reading the verdict from the bench in front of the accused, they just sort of sent it to the New York Times. Or it's really odd. But it names two things. It claims that he is being removed from the priesthood, laicized, for blasphemy on social media, and secondly, for disobedience to the bishop. So I want to take you to those up and get your thoughts on the first one. Now, I've watched Father Pavone's response. He says that there are some social media posts that he's deleted, that he was very angry, and in anger, he did use a phrase that is, profane, against the second commandment. But it was in anger. He did it. He removed it. He apologized, and he says, taking his word, he went to confession and he dealt with it. Does this sound like the kind of, well, let me put it this way: you're a priest. If a priest came to you in confession and confessed that they had, written a blasphemy, would you feel a need to run to the Vatican to get a trial started? Is that the sort of, and yeah, blasphemy is obviously a serious thing, but is there anything out of proportion as a priest? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, just like with any crime, there's degrees, and every sin there's
Yes.
degrees of how serious this is. I'm from the south side of Chicago, and I'm going to tell you right now, people from the south side of Chicago, similar to Brooklyn, have a
Yes.
propensity of using vulgar language more than your average, especially your average Midwesterner, almost to the
Yes.
scandal of other Midwesterners. So it's something that people from the south side, Southsiders, need to control and be careful of. So there's a difference between flying off the handle, which is never a good thing, and
Mhm.
then there's one where it's, you thought about it, you wrote out a statement, and then you still came out with this
Mm.
blasphemous language. But I always like to remind everyone, Father Gerald Murray, excuse me,
Mm.
of the Archdiocese of New York. He's part of the papal posse on EWTN.
Mm.
And he even came out and said, look, even if he was guilty of blasphemy and disobedience, these do not rise to the level of being dismissed from the clerical state. This is an extreme punishment, which is usually reserved for extreme crimes, like what we saw with McCarrick.
Mm.
And what it's doing is basically sending a message that you can't hide behind canon law. If we don't like you, we're coming after you.
Mm.
And it's a reminder, too, to anyone in your audience who's not traditional, who attends the Novus Ordo, you're not safe there either. For all these people like, well, sorry about the trads, sorry that they're attacking the traditional right, but I'm fine with the Novus Ordo, so they're going to leave me alone. No. Okay. Anyone that basically toes any of the orthodox lines of the church, pro-life, solemn liturgy, they're coming after you. And it was a reminder of me when they really, in the Archdiocese of Chicago, where I currently live, where they were going after St. John Cantius and all the other traditional
Mm.
groups. They also went after a priest, St. Stanislaus Kostka Parish, the
Mm.
mother church of all Poles in Chicago. He did ad orientem. He did Novus Ordo. He didn't even do Latin. He just simply did ad orientem. And they went after him for that. So they're
Mm.
going to go after you just simply because they don't want orthodoxy, it seems. They don't want even people to be traditionally minded. That's the sad thing, and everybody needs to realize that. And I just want to make this call, and I'm making this call on every show that I go on, and I've been doing this for the last year and a half since we founded the coalition. We really do need to unite or die. It's as simple as that.
Yes.
We have to put away our differences, because guess what? The left, they put away their differences very easily and move forward with these attacks. There's a reason why Father Michael Flager, Father Jimmy Martin are not being punished. All right. And yeah, it's all, I think it's a valuable thing to bring up. Why isn't this happening? All right. But we got to be careful of creating a straw man argument. Okay. And
Mm.
we have to look at, and what I am trying to tell people is, no matter what Father Pavone did, how the Vatican released this
Mm.
is wrong. Okay. I asked him this morning, I asked Father Pavone, because we text. I asked him, I said, Father, as of today, as of Tuesday, when we were
Mhm.
recording this, did you receive any official notification that you're laicized? And he said no. Right? Again, getting back to law, I don't care if it's United States. I don't
Yes.
care if it's Roman. I don't care if it's Anglo-Saxon. A law and a ruling does not take effect until it's promulgated. All right.
Yes.
So the Archbishop, the Nuncio, Archbishop Pierre, just basically sending a letter to every bishop on, what was it, December 13th, saying that they ruled on November 9th that he is to be laicized. Until he receives that, I'm still going to call him father. I'll probably call him father after he gets it as well. But, Eric Sammons at Crisis had, I thought, a decent article, a very good article. But at the end, he said, well, I'm calling him Frank Pavone because we have to follow what the church is saying on this. And I emailed him, and I'm good friends with Eric. And I said, Eric, just to let you know, he has not received any notification that he's been officially laicized yet. So I would say continue calling him father until then. Then we can have a debate of whether or not we should call him father. But I'm pretty certain that we cannot do this. He has to be notified. And what you're seeing is the Diocese of Amarillo and the Bishop Zurich of Amarillo hiding under a rock, it seems, hoping for other people to carry the water. And it's just not right.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like I said, it's bizarre. It's as if you're at home and someone said, "Oh, why aren't you in prison? I heard they sent you to prison yesterday." What? It's so bizarre. But let's talk about the second point, and you alluded to this in our earlier conversation. What I've seen, some people who are, trying to just accept this say is, well, it's his own fault. You just have to obey the bishop. Whatever the bishop tells you to do, if he's your bishop, whatever he says to do, you just have to do it. Is that really? I mean, is that a proper understanding of the obedience that a secular priest, and by secular I mean a priest who is not in a religious community, who's not taking religious vows, is supposed to have?
No, and I get a little tired of it when the Padre Pio example is brought forward.
Yes.
Padre Pio took vows of obedience. Diocesan priests and secular priests, and that includes the Society of Pius X,
Yes.
do not take vows. They take promises, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And we promise to be co-workers with our bishop or with our superior, all right?
Mm-hmm.
That does not mean that we're indentured servants. For example, in fact, the executive director of the coalition, David Avignone, who runs the day-to-day operations of the coalition, gave me a great example of this yesterday when we were speaking. My bishop cannot tell me what I'm going to eat for dinner tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, on days of abstinence, I'm bound by church law, like everyone else is, to abstain. But he cannot say, Father, from now on, you're not eating chicken. You're eating this. That doesn't happen. Now, we can say in religious life that it is possible for the superior to say, this is what we're all eating. And unless you're allergic to it, you're eating it as well. All right. That's a thing. That's a small thing. But we have to get away from this idea that has been put forward in media that somehow the bishop is the general and the priests are privates. We're not. We're co-workers. And I'm tired of being accused of being disobedient, because if I was being disobedient, I can assure you, Bishop Malloy, my bishop, would bring charges in canon law against me very quickly, because he would love to do that. I'm sidelined. I'm canceled right now because he can't laicize me. He can't remove me. And what's so frightening about this situation with Father Pavone is people can critique him and say, well, he could have played ball better. All valid points. It still didn't warrant what happened to him. It did not. And we do need priests that are more in the pro-life movement. And, as a diocesan priest, I could tell you something right now, because people are like, well, you're ordained to be a parish priest. That's mostly true. Most diocesan priests are ordained to be parish priests, but some spend their entire priesthood as teachers in high schools, principals of high schools, chaplains in prisons, chaplains in nursing homes, okay, chaplains in hospitals. Those are a lot of valid examples of what the diocesan priesthood does. It's not just parish life. I think most of us feel the call to the priesthood and see the examples of some of the great parish priests like John Vianney. And we obviously have that calling for it. But I'm going to tell you right now, when I was in active ministry, when I was ordained, along with all of my classmates, not only were we assigned to the parish, we were assigned part-time to the local Catholic high school to teach. That
Mm.
wasn't an option. I could say, no, sorry, I'm a parish priest. I don't go to the schools. No, I had to teach. And there was
Yes.
a time there when I was in active ministry where I was full-time teaching in the high school.
Mm.
And again, I couldn't go to the bishop at the time, Bishop Doran, may he rest in peace, and say, no, sorry, I'm ordained to be in the parish. You can't put me in the high school. It doesn't work that way. If he asked me
Yes.
to be the diocesan ethicist, which is a full-time job, or at least it was, I couldn't say, no, sorry, I have to be in the parish.
Mm.
We have to realize that. So for the people that are trying to make the argument that, well, Father Pavone was ordained to be a parish priest, so he should just be a parish priest. Well, diocesan priests do a lot more. Now, that said, yes, the bishop does have the right to say, Father Pavone, you've done this long enough. Now it's time to do this. He is basically arguing that he feels that this is his vocation. Okay.
Mhm.
I think he makes a good argument, but it's not an argument that is without critique. I mean, I think that we could say this, but again, it doesn't
Mhm.
rise to the level of being laicized. I hope everyone understands that.
No, and you're right. Again, there's a whole other topic on even the limits of obedience within a religious vow, because there are limits. There are different limits, but here we are dealing, and you're right. Very few people I see drawing that distinction. We're not dealing with a religious vow of obedience, but in simple obedience within the governance of the church. And again, in all these, people seem to forget is God, as Saint Thomas tells us, created us to be rational beings. We are not governed as our irrational beings. That there's just a force that compels us, and we have no thought involved. That our obedience is meant to engage our intellect, and we don't just follow orders in that sense in the normal context, without any thought. So it's again an important topic, but picking up on that, is there also a distinction in sort of that I guess your sense, you'd agree with me that these charges that are alleged, there's something more really going on here. That the reason that they have done this to Father Pavone, claim they've done it, is really not much to do with these 2 points, but just because he's been very outspoken about not just the life issue, but very practical. Like, you can't just be pro-life in the abstract. We need to elect certain people, and he's been very practical in telling people what they really should and shouldn't do to advance the cause.
Oh, absolutely. This is sending a message to the rest of us.
Mhm.
Shut up and get in line. Sad to say. And
Mm.
I think they're sending a message loud and clear to Father Altman, who is just as um, predominant in the media as
Mm.
Father Pavone is. And God bless Father Pavone for staying ahead of this story. We tell canceled priests, look, don't be uncharitable, but at the
Mm.
same time, don't be quiet when you get canceled. All right. You have to tell your side of the story. You have to appeal, yes, to the Vatican, and as Father Pavone says, to the people of God. This is an injustice. I think they're going after him simply because he is strongly pro life. He strongly pushes that. He shows the hypocrisy with the Vatican and the USCCB when it comes to Democrat politicians and pro life politicians. Notice I didn't say Republican politicians. I said pro-life
Yes.
politicians. And I think they're also going after him because he supported Trump. And
Mhm.
you and I can both say this, and you and I can both agree to this, that we don't agree with everything that Trump has done in his past or even done during his presidency. I'd rather see him in the White House now, though, than Joe
Yes.
Biden.
Oh, yeah.
My gas tank would like to see that too. So,
Yes.
it's a reminder to us. So I think those are really the reasons that they're going after him.
Mm.
And again, it comes back to, you do this you announce this a week before Christmas. Father Pavone finds out, not from his bishop, not from the nuncio, not from the Pope, but finds out from CNA, which is EWTN, all right, which, because of him, EWTN has raised a lot of money. All right.
Mm.
As I like to say, Mother Angelica is rolling in her grave. And he has to find out by asking a question, by being asked a question by a reporter who received leaked the letter that went to the bishops and refused to
Mm.
share it with Father Pavone. All right, no, sorry, that's not how it works.
Mm.
And so I'm glad that he's getting out there. I'm glad to see him, and we told him we would be more than happy to help any way we can. But Priests for Life is a much bigger organization than we are. He really doesn't need our help. So God bless him.
Mm.
And one of the reasons we're talking is to remind people that there's more than just Father Altman. There's just more than Father
Yes.
Pavone, even more than just Father Lovell out there. We have dozens of priests that we're helping, and we know of hundreds of priests, if not thousands, across the country and the world that don't have a voice. They don't know where to turn, and we want to make sure that they have a place to live, they have a meal, 3 meals a day. Really, we want to make sure that they do not go for want and have all the means to defend themselves and due process of law.
Very, very true. And you're right on the temporal level. Father Pavone, doesn't seem to be. He does have an organization. He has people already there to help him. Obviously, on the spiritual, the human, the psychological level, to be persecuted, he certainly needs help there. But you're right. He's unlike many other priests who may be literally out in the cold and not have the same kind of structures there to help him. So that's a really good point. But one thing I want to on this point about what's really going on here, and I agree with you completely. There's another sort of fallacy out there that I think really comes from an Americanist heresy, as Leo XIII called it, in a sense that we've been so imbued with this separation of church and state, and religion's a private matter, that they say, well, he really did something wrong. He got involved in politics, and priests should have nothing to do with politics. They should essentially be like the Queen of England, right? Never express a political opinion, be this abstract, I have no opinions. And that's not really the way the Catholic priesthood, Catholic priests and bishops have acted through the whole history of the church. Is that, I mean, do you agree that is really an overstatement to say his problem is he shouldn't be talking about politics?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's just simply not true in the Catholic
Yes.
Church. And what a lot of people, again, for those that are not too familiar with Archbishop Lefebvre, the main issue wasn't just the Mass.
Yes.
It was this idea, the famous argument he had with Cardinal Ratzinger at the time, where
Yes.
Ratzinger was trying to really put forward this American idea that there is a separation of church and state. No, there's not. Christ is our king. It's as simple
Mm.
as that. Our government, okay, should be hold responsible to Jesus Christ and his laws first and foremost. And I want to remind everyone that our Constitution does not limit that from happening. All right,
Mm.
we have to realize this. We have to also realize that the First Amendment is about protecting the church. It's not about protecting the state from the church. All right, the other way around. And
Yeah.
he has the freedom to say this. I've spoken to many of people who have said that because they always want to say we're going to lose our tax exempt status if you keep saying things. And
Let it go.
I'm looking at all these leftist priests, Schlager, Martin.
Yeah.
Again, they're out there shilling for the side of death. Why
Yes.
why cannot we have priests that are standing up and making sure that Donald Trump is appointing the right Supreme Court justices to overturn Roe
Mm.
versus Wade? Oh, look, that actually happened. All right.
Yes.
So probably in no small part due to the fact that Father Pavone influenced Donald Trump, especially
Mm.
for appointments. I don't have a magic ball, and I don't have any sure fact knowledge that it was because of Frank Pavone, Father Frank Pavone, that he did this. But I'm pretty sure he had a good influence on the appointment of judges, and not just on the Supreme Court, throughout the benches
Yes.
on the federal level.
No, I agree. And there were certainly many influences on Donald Trump and other good ones as well. But I think we have to give Father credit that he certainly was one influence that had a role, that he certainly had a role in the thinking of Donald Trump. I think that's very fair.
Yeah.
But again, you're right. And it does come down to that argument that Archbishop Lefebvre had with Cardinal Ratzinger about the reign of Christ the King, that Christ is to be king, and we are to work in the temporal world for his reign. It's not just some off the in the future, we'll just some pious little idea. It's we have to work for it. Now, again, most circumstances, priests are primarily, they don't have time to run for office and, be a governor somewhere, although there are examples in history where prelates and priests have held secular offices, but that's not the normal. That's not the normal thing, because they have other duties. But certainly we've sort of now taken the idea that, well, they're just not even supposed to advise the faithful, figure it out on your own. Well, that's not what Pius XII did. In the election when the communists threatened to take over Italy, uh, he wrote to the Italian citizens and said, "I'm telling you, under pain of mortal sin, you cannot vote for these people. This is what you have to do." So you can't get more political than that. And that was Pope Pius XII.
No, I mean, absolutely. And we have to keep something in mind too. And Father Pavone has said this in as many statements and interviews. Either 2016 or 2017, Zurich was Bishop Zurich was trying to get him out of Priests for Life. And he played the parish card again. And apparently Pavone said, okay, I'll go to a parish, probably knowing in the back of his mind that Zurich had no intention of putting him in a parish. And Zurich said no. Basically, Zurich wanted him canceled and sidelined, similar to how I was for so many years, doing nothing. All right. And I've had priests come up to me, priests in my own diocese, say, well, the bishop is not obligated to give you an assignment. I said, yeah, but the bishop is obligated to pay me. The bishop is obligated to take care of me. And he can't restrict my ministry, meaning he can't stop me from going and helping places if I want to, if I've done nothing wrong. And that's exactly what he's doing. And not only that, by doing it, he's casting a shadow over me, because now we use this non-canonical term, a priest in good standing. You'll never see that phrase, in good standing, in canon law.
It's like full communion. That phrase doesn't really exist.
It doesn't exist. And we have to realize is that, look, if you're not going to give Father Pavone an assignment, well, why can't he run Priests for Life? All right. And they want to use all these different things about, well, he should, Phil Lawler was saying this in an article. Well, there has to be some oversight from the bishops. No, there doesn't. EWTN, as long as Mother Angelica was in charge, there was that was not happening. Or if it was very minimal. All right. It was only until after she was out of the picture that they basically took over the network. All right. There's no reason for this. Or, if Priests for Life is a secular organization, there's a lot of secular organizations that the church runs. Okay. I think Catholic Mutual is one of those. All right. And it's an insurance company out of Omaha, which we're helping to investigate. The Coalition for Canceled Priests is a 501c3. I'm assuming Catholic Family News is. We're secular organizations. There's nothing saying that priests can't be in charge of secular organizations. That doesn't make any sense. Now, at least what I did here at the Coalition is I made sure we had an executive director. He's the one that runs everything from time to time, day in and day out. And, that allows me to come on your show. It allows me to continue doing my spiritual reading and all of that, and to go out and be that spokesman. But, people were making it seem like that priests can't be spokesmen. Or, in my opinion, the best spokesmen for the pro-life movement are priests. And yes, I'll cede the argument that Father Pavone doesn't always have to do it, that it will continue without him. I don't think he's going anywhere, but, it's not all dependent on him. Of course not. And I think Father Pavone knows that. I just think that he sees it as a unique vocation with the blessing of Cardinal O'Connor, his first prelate, his first bishop, and that this is something that God is calling him to do. Well, let him do it. Why is this such a bad thing? This is a good thing, that to have something like this.
Absolutely. Well, we do have one other topic to talk about, but before we get there, I want to ask you one tough question, I think, that is on people's mind. And that is, I agree with you. And as a lawyer, you always take the easiest response first, right? You always take the one that creates the least problem. So for now, I agree with you completely that until he is actually given proof that the real canonical proceeding happened, that there's, it real in the sense that it happened in reality, not that it was just or legitimate, but given the piece of paper, he has no obligation to change anything about what he's doing. But let me ask you the harder question. Assuming they do, which, they may never, but assuming they do produce a piece of paper that appears to claim they went through these judicial motions and have signed a paper that says you're laicized, do you think he needs to stop saying mass, take off his take off his clerical garb? What's your thoughts on that harder question?
Well, I would like to say this, and if Father Pavone ever sees this, we'll buy you a cassock, Father. Put the cassock. Let's burn the tab collar shirts, okay? Let's wear the cassock, all right? And I joke a little bit, and we need a little humor when dealing with something so tragic. But yes, I think until at least until
Yes,
we that he's been officially
we do.
notified, he has every right to be in clerics. He has every right to continue celebrating mass. I I don't know this for sure, but I am pretty positive, without knowing for sure, but I'm pretty positive there's been priests that have left their diocese to join the Society of Pius X who've probably been excommunicated by their bishop, or at least it was attempted.
Hmm.
All right. Now,
Hmm.
excommunication is also laicization. It's a permanent suspension of your faculties, and
Yes,
I'm sure that that's happened. I would love to see Father Pavone embrace tradition. I would love to see Father Pavone, if he doesn't know it already, to learn the traditional mass. But at the same time, it's a reminder to all of us in the traditional world.
yes,
There's a lot of good people fighting out there on the
yes,
so-called Novus Ordo side. I say the so-called because again, we have to unite or die, and we have to realize that we need to. Yes, in my opinion, we need to um, establish the importance of the traditional mass, of the traditional theology of the church when it comes to Christ as King. And we need to do that, I think, more with honey than with vinegar. And when we do that, I think we are going to see a lot more people embrace tradition, and that is something that we certainly
yes,
need. Now, when it comes out, I think I would at least have to take a look at what the Vatican actually has said, and to see
mm,
what actual charges, not vague things of blasphemy and disobedience, but to see what they actually say, to make a determination if I think he should continue doing that. And again, that would be only my opinion, and my
yes.
opinion, 4.95 will get you a cup of coffee. Uh, so that I would have to take a look at that to see what that comes down with. But and this is what I've been saying in every interview I've been doing the
Yes,
last couple of days, how they released this information was wrong, and every single bishop should stand up and apologize that it was handled this poorly, because it
yes.
was handled poorly how it was transmitted.
No, and one thing, again, is a little side note, but I do want to agree with you on one point. I don't like the term, and a lot of websites will use it, a Novus Ordo priest. And I try not to use it at all because it's like these other terms, full community. It's not really meaning anything because you are either a priest or you're not, right? There's either you're a priest or you're not. There's no difference on
Yep.
the character is the same. Now, obviously, you can make distinction. This is a priest who was ordained in the Novus Ordo rites, or this is a priest who offers the Novus Ordo Mass. Now, that they are just facts about what he does, but they are facts about actions of the person. But in terms of being, one is either a priest or not. And so I think it isn't a very helpful term. I agree
No,
with
and
you. And
you know what? And I would say the same thing. The term traditional Catholic, I think it's redundant.
yeah, yes,
I
yes,
mean, to be Catholic, you have to be traditional.
yes.
We are a traditional based religion. It is as simple as that, and it's as beautiful as that as well.
Very, very true. But again, and the last point, I appreciate your discretion, and I think that's right. That's even when Archbishop Lefebvre was often informed of some of the penalties that he considered null. He always said before he reacted, well, let me wait. I want to see. Let me see what the document says. We have to read it first. And then, as I said, sometimes they never even arrive. They tell them this penalty happened, and some of them never even arrived. So I appreciate that. But one other story I will share in that vein, in terms of because you mentioned that, I have heard Bishop Fillet publicly tell this story, and in addition, I've spoken to the priest involved privately. So I know it's a true story. There is a priest who is in the society now who was given a letter of excommunication from a congregation for religious in Rome. And there was, again, similar situation to Father Pavone, some charges that had made no sense. irregularities. So Bishop Fillet tells the story. He brought this to then Cardinal Castrillan Hoyos, and he said, "Your Excellency, what, or your Eminence, what is this? This seems unjust. What do we do with this?" And he said, Cardinal Hoyos said, "Oh, just throw that in the trash. Pay no attention to it." That's He said, "But this, you're saying this didn't come from the Congregation for the Clergy?" "Oh, it did, but that doesn't count." And he said, how can that be the answer?" And he said, "That's how you should deal with it." So, and that was a cardinal of the church. That sadly, the times we live in, that we cannot just necessarily take everything on its face value. But
And can I just simply say before we move on to our last topic,
yes,
I think it's a diocesan priest's right to say, look, I'm going to act like a religious, and I'm just going to simply do what the bishop tells me to
yes,
do. So I think
mhm,
that St. John Cantius has the right to basically say, okay, we're not going to have the traditional mass on the first Sunday of the
mhm,
month or major holidays. And if they wanted us to
yeah,
get rid of it in a couple of years, okay, we'll do that. That's fine. But please don't say that somehow you're being more obedient
yes,
to us who are actually trying to defend our rights and the rights of other priests. All right. So please don't imply, don't insinuate that somehow the way you're doing it is somehow more obedient than the way I'm doing it. I'm certainly not doing that. If you want to lay down in the mud, lay down in the mud. Okay. But please don't critique us on that just because we're not following that. I am always trying to be the most obedient priest that I can be. And that is first and foremost through Jesus Christ, through his duly appointed superiors, period.
mhm. Very good. Well, if you've enjoyed this program and are interested in the topic, we have some next thing we want to mention to you. You may want to learn more, and an excellent opportunity to think about, again, some of these topics and many more is a conference that the Coalition for Canceled Priests is sponsoring this coming June. And this is your second annual conference that will be held in your hometown there of Chicago, June 23rd and 24th. So can you tell us, here's the website of the conference if you'd like more. As you can see, it is at the Coalition for Canceled Priests website, which is canceledpriest.org. And if you go to events, you'll find it. But tell us a little bit about, what is this conference? Does it have a theme or a general purpose?
So it's the general purpose of that is for Catholics to come together to get solid talks, and you can see there, we have several excellent Catholics speaking. And again, not necessarily all on the same page on every little thing, and
Mhm,
that's not a bad
sure.
thing. But
Yes.
all that are trying to be the best Catholics that they can be. And you're speaking. Kennedy Hall
I
is
was going to
speaking.
say, you do have a few dodgy people there, like that guy on the top row, right? Yes.
Or like Dr. Peter Prochaska, yes.
Yes.
Um, but we want to, remind people of the importance of the priesthood, and that
Yes.
sidelining priests, canceling priests is not a good thing. And it's a good chance for the priests to meet the laity that are supporting them, and vice versa, to see that the work that we're doing, we try to be as transparent as possible. We're also a week from today closing on property in Northwest Indiana, so that priests that need a home can have a home, priests that need a safe house, they can have a safe house. So it's just a Catholic conference to come and support not only the mission of the coalition, but really the mission of the church, and to go deeper. For Catholics to come across the country, and it's in Rosemont. Rosemont, Illinois is basically O'Hare Airport. We're at the Hilton in Rosemont. It's an easy shuttle from O'Hare. It's very near public transportation, and we want this to be a national, if not international, conference. And we want people to see the work that we're doing and come together. And I've just discovered, going to a lot of conferences, some of them with you, just the joy that it brings to both priests and to the laity and to religious that come, just to get together and bounce ideas off each other and share a meal. Especially after the COVID lockdowns, it's so important that we get back to
Yes.
doing this. So we are committed to that, and we're so happy, Brian, that you're going to be able to join us
Yes.
and basically keep moving the mission of the church forward, and that is the mission of Jesus Christ.
No, thank you. I look forward to it. There's several people there I'm looking forward to speaking with. And again, a lot of people I say, look, well, I can look at a video on YouTube, or so a lot of conferences make their talks available afterwards. And that's a good thing. It reaches more people, but it's not the same thing to go in person. It's nice. I'm glad we can speak over the internet for this interview, but it's not the same thing as sitting down, having lunch with you, Father, and being able to have a more human way of interacting, communication. So it's worth the effort to make the trip to Chicago, because it's not just about hearing the conferences, although they will be excellent, but it will be that meeting people, getting to reconnect with people you haven't seen, meet some new friends. And I've met a lot of people by attending conferences. So tickets, it says available soon. We will certainly let our viewers know when there actually can be purchased. We're about 6 months off, but it's June 23rd, 2-day conference. So we look forward to being there, and wish that very great success.
Oh,
Well,
thank you very much. We're hoping to have the ticket page up as soon as possible. We've had some glitches with a new program that we're using, and I do apologize for that, but we're hoping to get it up as soon as possible. So if anybody wants to gift it as a Christmas gift, just simply put a little card saying the ticket's on its way. But it would be
yes.
a beautiful Christmas present. So
Very true. Very true. Well, we will definitely keep our readers and viewers informed and let them know as the date approaches. So thank you for taking time to join us today, Father, and we'll hope to see you again on a special report.
thank you, Brian. God bless.
Thank you. God bless.